Hello, everyone. My name is Alexa Desjardins, and I am the recruitment specialist at the School of Architecture, Planning, and Landscape. Welcome to our discovery session. Thank you so much for coming. It's great to have you all here. Before we get started, I want to let you know that this session is being recorded. We would like to acknowledge and pay tribute to the traditional territories of the peoples of Treaty 7, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley First Nations. The city of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. By the signing of Treaty 7 in 1877, the university recognizes that we are all treaty people. To kickstart this session, we want to share a video of SAPL.
The world is about good design. Good design helps us live better lives. It helps us encounter beauty in our lives. It helps us figure out how we live together as human beings, which I happen to think is the single most important question addressing humanity today.
Great. Okay, so that gives you a little snapshot into what it's like to be at SAPL, some of our facilities. But for the rest of the program today, I will outline some of the awesome things about SAPL, and then we'll invite our speakers to present on what architecture, planning, and landscape architecture are, and how they can address some of the challenges our world is facing today. We will also hear a brief overview of our minor in architectural studies. Following the presentations, we'll have a question and answer period until our program ends at 1 p.m. Calgary time. If you have a question throughout the presentation, please put it in the chat and then we'll answer those during our Q&A. SAPL students are positive change makers, learning how to tackle some of the world's greatest problems. Our programs are focused on challenge-based learning, building, prototyping, and collaborating with our community and industry partners. We have 5 fundamental principles in our professional programs: community engaged learning, entrepreneurial mindset, future-focused design, research, and social innovation. Our research projects showcase the intersection between academia, industry, and policymaking. They provide advanced skill-building opportunities, promote entrepreneurial job creation, and diversify Calgary's building and construction industry. Our students are learning how to create safe neighborhoods with economic prosperity, interactive public spaces, green areas, and accessible transportation. These communities are the foundation for a future that is environmentally sustainable, socially equitable, and infectious disease resilient. At SAPL, we offer undergraduate courses for all UCalgary students and a minor in architectural studies. At the graduate level, we have professional programs in architecture, planning, and landscape architecture. We also offer research-based master's and PhD programs in environmental design and a Doctor of Design. SAPL has 2 locations: our main campus in Northwest Calgary, as well as our newer downtown space, the City Building Design Lab. We invite you to experience our student spaces by using the 360 virtual tour on our website. Now, I would like to introduce our first speaker today, Dr. Graham Libby, a professor from our architecture program. I'll hand it over to you. Oh, sorry. I think you're on mute still.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much and welcome to our information session this morning. My name is Graham Libby. I've been teaching in the architecture program for many years. I've been involved in design studio courses and courses in architectural history and theory. I've also had the opportunity to run the program, and for a number of years I was a co-partner in a small practice in Calgary. So I've sort of looked at every aspect of the profession. So today I thought I would just talk very briefly about primarily some of the things that our alumni who are working in the Calgary area are sort of involved in. But before I do that, just a little bit of background on the program. So we offer a 7-semester professional degree in architecture, the Master of Architecture, which is really the only degree offered in Canada today. And we typically graduate in the range of 50 or 60 students a year. And these students, most of them will go into private practice in the profession, but we have a certain number of students who go into sort of related aspects of the discipline, including academia, working for governmental agencies, particularly municipalities, working in real estate and construction and development. So, I mean, we've learned over many years that an architecture degree can lead you in various directions. As Alexa was sort of alluding to, our students come either with unrelated undergraduate degrees, or they can come through the University of Calgary program, undergraduate streams with a minor in architecture. And we have also a fairly significant number of students in the program who have pre-professional and professional degrees from institutions around the world. So we have a fairly significant cohort of international students, which introduces a very important aspect to sort of the culture of the school. As you probably know, design education revolves around the design studio, where students are constantly working on projects, what some people call experiential and applied learning. So architecture students, like students in the other programs, are doing a lot of drawing, model building, construction, and that sort of thing. So we sort of believe in learning through doing. We have a curriculum that builds sort of fundamental skills and then gets into sort of more comprehensive and technical aspects of architecture. We've recently begun to offer what we call a work integrated studio, where small groups of students are placed within professional offices to sort of experience working in a professional context firsthand. And then there are option studios that sort of round out the curriculum. Our program really focuses, I would say, primarily on 3 areas. We have a strong emphasis on digital design. We have a very strong commitment to construction, and we have a number of faculty who teach in the building science area. And we're very committed to the relationship between architecture and urbanism, or the city. And this is reflected in many of the things that we do. So we certainly use Calgary as a kind of laboratory for many of our teaching, research, and practice related activities. And this has been enhanced by the development of the downtown city building design lab, which allows us to more aggressively develop partnerships with governmental organizations and private companies. So, as I mentioned, I just wanted to touch a bit on some of the work our alumni are doing that kind of contribute to the continuous rethinking and transformation of Calgary. Calgary has recently experienced some significant economic changes, which are resulting in a kind of major rethink of how we think about the city and how the economic basis of the city is going to sort of unfold moving forward. So really, I'm just showing some pictures of work by people sort of involved in the program. So there's no doubt that the design of public space cuts across our three disciplines. Certainly a very strong aspect of our landscape architecture program, public space and the design of public space, and particularly Calgary's park system are things worth celebrating. I'm showing Poppy Plaza, which is a project by one of our faculty, Marc Boutin, that was completed a number of years ago. It's a commemorative space on the Bow River. It creates a sort of important public space along the river, and is an example, I think, of sort of forward-thinking public space design. On the right, a picture of one of our earlier graduates, David Edmonds, who runs a large and an important practice in Calgary called GEC. He's standing inside a new facility, the YMCA at Rocky Ridge in Northwest Calgary. It's a large multiplex, a kind of suburban community hub, which is something that certainly Alberta has invested in heavily in recent years. But this project is interesting in that it aggressively used parametric design, which is an aspect of computational or computer-oriented design, to develop the kind of shape of the building and to sort of rationalize the structure, which, as you can see here, uses glulam beams fabricated in British Columbia. Housing, of course, is a very important aspect of any city, and Sasha, my colleague who's going to speak afterwards, is certainly an expert in housing. Calgary is beginning to develop sort of newer modes of housing, and I'm just showing a recently completed project called the Grow Apartments by two of our alumni who run a firm called Moda. And this project is trying to, as you can see here, integrate community gardening into its form, as well as sort of exploring maybe sort of more contemporary approaches to designing urban housing. On the right is another one of our graduates, Majida Davani, who in partnership with her husband and a number of other people have developed a Calgary-based company called Round Square that has been very heavily involved in new kinds of housing throughout the city, and they've begun to develop larger and larger projects. So again, examples of how our alumni are sort of affecting this aspect of Calgary. Of course, there are much larger scales and scales that are very important for the development of cities moving forward. Calgary has a fairly well-developed transit system for a city of its size and sort of historical background. In recent years, the system has been expanded and sort of redeveloped. And certainly our alumni have been involved in various firms that have been working on the sort of extension and redevelopment of particularly the light rapid transit system. I mentioned the parks system and the parks department at the City of Calgary, which is quite an innovative organization. The project on the right is a environmental education center at Ralph Klein Park in Southeast Calgary, which is tied together with a large stormwater management park that uses sort of natural processes. And this was designed in conjunction with the landscape architecture firm Carson McCulloch. So it's a way of beginning to introduce green forms of infrastructure into the city, and we can look to other examples in the city of where this sort of activity is taking place. Of course, there are many other kinds of buildings that make up the fabric of a city. These are a couple of what smaller community buildings by more recent architectural practices that have emerged in the city. So I think one of the results of what we have done over many years as a school is to sort of inject this sort of new and vital energy into the sort of design culture of the city. And so there's a healthy number of smaller sort of emerging practices that are gaining traction in the city. We can also see a number of firms that are run by women, which I think is something worth noting. The Lola architecture firm, for example, which recently emerged, is an example of that. We also have graduates who are involved in larger firms. I'm showing a picture of Rob Adamson, who graduated some years ago and is a senior partner at Dialogue, which is a large Calgary-based architectural firm who have worked in conjunction with internationally recognized practices, such as the Bjarke Ingels Group on the design of the Telesky building, which is a recently completed skyscraper in downtown Calgary. But Dialogue also is actively involved in a wide range of projects. They were responsible for the design of the new Calgary Cancer Center, which is a large healthcare facility that's nearing completion on the Foothills Hospital site, as an example. Architecture sort of overlaps with interior design, and we have a number of practices that are doing very well in this area, what we can also call hospitality design. The McKinley firm has been in business for over 20 years and has done work certainly across Western Canada. The Frank Architecture Group, who we can see here on the right, again, has emerged as one of Canada's, I think, most interesting and exciting interior design or interior architecture firm, and they're doing a lot of work in Calgary and beyond, designing restaurants and that sort of thing, which is an important part of sort of supplementing the life and sort of vitality of a city. There's also a kind of role for, highly speculative or sort of visionary work that's maybe more experimental. That's reflected in the work of two of our graduates who operate a firm called Spectacle, and they've won a number of awards and national awards in recognition of their work, which has been to date primarily what we would call theoretical, but they're beginning to be more involved in actual projects. The same is evident at the other sort of end of the scale, where in the work of a recent graduate named Sumer Singh, who's creating more object-oriented projects in his work. And of course, sustainability is a major aspect of how we need to think about buildings and cities moving forward. Certainly, we are teaching it quite strongly, and graduates and recent graduates are quite active in this area. David Silburn, in particular, was for many years running a very interesting program at the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology that really focused on green building development. Again, on the sort of scale of urban institutions, I'll just mention briefly Kate Thompson, who graduated from our program about 20 years ago. She is now the president and CEO of the Calgary Land Municipal Corporation and has been involved in recent years in the development of a number of very important new institutions, including the new Calgary Central Library and other projects in the East Village. Her work, which is essentially arm's length from the city of Calgary, extends into other areas of the city as well, including the transformation of our Performing Arts Center, which is about to get underway. And finally, I think we can be very proud to say that a number of our graduates have Indigenous heritage. I'm picking on a couple of who don't actually work in the Calgary area, but I think it's a very important dimension of how we are thinking about cities and architecture. Wanda Della Costa, who graduated from our program a number of years ago, is emerging as a very important educator, both in the United States and in Canada. She's a institution professor at Arizona State, where she's leading sort of very interesting initiatives in Indigenous architecture. So I'll wrap up there with this sort of statement that talks about the kind of relationship between buildings and cities and how we have to think of them as sort of integrated systems. So I'll stop there, and if you have questions, please ask them after Sasha's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now I will invite Dr. Sasha Senkova, a professor from our planning program.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alexa. It's really a pleasure to follow Graham's presentation. That was so informative and captivating in terms of the contribution of our own graduates to city building culture of design excellence. I'm going to talk more broadly about planning, and indeed landscape architecture is embedded in the fusion of different influences that shape our cities. So very briefly, I'm going to focus on what is planning, why do you want to be a planner, what is it that planners do, and then who we are at the School of Landscape Architecture and Planning, and how we approach the education of future planners. I'll start with sharing very briefly my lab site. I'm a director of the city's Policy and Planning Lab, and I seem to be actually unable to move to my next slide for whatever reason. I'm not sure why this is happening, but Alexa, would I be able to use the presentation that you have?
Yeah, no problem. Can you just unshare and then I'll share for you?
Stop sharing, yes. So My really career is very diverse. I started as an architect, a professional architect, but was always intrigued by urbanism and city writ large. So I embraced on a new wave of education, master's degrees in urban and regional planning at the University of Sussex, and a PhD at the University of Toronto in planning and geography, to have a well-rounded approach to the challenges that our cities face indeed. And I would say that that is a defining element of really planners. Our graduate comes from different walks of life in their undergraduate degrees. They would have done design degrees, urban history, urban studies, biology, engineering, and then they embrace the planning profession that is so versatile and indeed diverse. I do believe that there are no small plans. I've been fortunate to work in over 25 cities around the world, and many different countries in Europe, and also, of course, North America and Latin America and Central Asia. Cities are very, very exciting. They are probably the largest piece of art that civilizations have created. They have a beautiful history. You see examples from the historic core of Riga and Boston, and the layering of the amazing urban landscape in London. Some of the cities where I did work for international institutions such as the World Bank and the United Nations and Council of Europe. And this really is an illustration of something which is important to understand. There are no small plans. We definitely work at various scales, from the individual site, which is more aligned with the architectural profession, to the city block, to the arterial corridor that shapes exciting parts of the city, historic cores, indeed neighborhoods, and also the exciting milieu of the city and its long-term perspective and vision of the future. The next slide, please, Alexa. I'm also committed to connecting theory with professional practice, published extensively, probably over 150 publications throughout my academic and professional career. And these are some of the books that I published in the last year while we were in various forms of lockdowns. They really focus on housing, and I'm very passionate about this essential component of a city and a neighborhood, which takes over 60 to 65% of the urban land in any city, in any place. And I do share these experiences with my students, and we really try to navigate this complex nexus of planning, design, and policy. The next slide, please. So indeed, why planning? And this is really the way we could see our amazing downtown cityscape, the way it has shaped over the years with different architectural styles and fusion of office spaces, as well as residential and in a public realm that indeed connects these different land uses and opportunities. That very, very dynamic concentration of people and jobs that today is experiencing immense challenges. But this is what city planners do. They have a vision for the future of a city, and they actually manage urban growth, or in some cases, urban decline, through a series of interventions that regulate land use, that align the uses for residential, retail functions, as well as places of work, places of entertainment. Indeed, the amazing fusion of that urban landscape with the natural environment and the natural world, and the way we impact the lives of people that are attracted to cities, but also our interface with the natural world. Cities, and especially in a large country like Canada, are really islands of our urban life, very intense formations, but those islands have an incredible opportunity to influence the impact that we have on the environment and indeed navigate for a better future that is more sustainable and more resilient, and indeed has a positive impact on our fight for climate change and the reversal of some of the human impact that we have left in our places, cities, and indeed that's why planning is a growing profession in terms of its importance in directing and navigating city building. But we are really well positioned to leave a very important imprint of our professional work on the past, the present, and the future of cities, not just cities like Calgary, but indeed cities in Canada and across the world. The 21st century is the century of cities, where 60% of the population lives in cities, and that continues to grow with over 1 million people migrating to cities on a weekly basis. So it's very, very important that we have the tools and we have the capacity and the knowledge to actually manage this process, and that integration of different functions, but also more importantly, the impact, the built environment and the urban systems, the flow of services such as transportation and water and other services and amenities shape the livelihoods of people in cities. The next slide, please. So we tend to work at different scales, and perhaps this is a good illustration about a neighborhood type of intervention. That this is one of the best neighborhoods in Canadian cities, which incidentally was also the home for the Winter Olympic Games that Canada hosted in 2010. This is today a place that is very vibrant, one of the most livable neighborhoods in one of the most livable cities, indeed constantly ranked in the top 5 cities around the world, Vancouver. It's a place, and you could see the transition from something which at the bottom is the plan itself, with the navigation of different land uses, city blocks, the integration of built form and spaces with the environment, the water, the green, open spaces. And also, interestingly enough, that was a place of abandonment. That was a former industrial site, fairly large one that due to the industrial transformation and has actually been left abandoned with a great degree of environmental pollution. So today, and you see the image at the top, it's called The Birds. That's the amazing square, a public space that has been created with a lot of emphasis on historic preservation. One of the warehouses is transformed as a community center today. Also, one of the greatest Canadian architects, Arthur Anderson, influenced here the design of the buildings that, again, are green buildings, net zero buildings that also shape the built form and frame the spaces and the human activity and interaction in that amazing neighborhood that is home for 12,000 people today. The next slide, please. So what planners do, again, we navigate that amazing urban complexity and we shape cities. We leave a very important legacy. And indeed, cities around the world have an amazing history of over 10,000 years. Vancouver and a lot of cities in Canada are younger cities that are still experiencing a great evolution of growth. But indeed, a lot of the planning centers on a strategic vision for the city. When we talk about urbanism writ large, that is again a horizon for at least 20 to 25 years, when we try to predict how different functions in the city will evolve and provide the regulatory and the policy framework for those functions, and the amazing energy of businesses and people and designers to transform these places. So Vancouver, again, is one of the most livable cities in the world, and certainly a leader in terms of green and sustainable urbanism in Canada. So it started with a simple vision back then, articulated in the mid-80s, a vision for a complete downtown downtown, sustainable, resilient, livable, and vibrant. And this is what we see today. Again, it's a city that has grown up, has become very dense due to geography and constraints, and has this incredible relationship with the natural environment, the water, the green systems that indeed surround and encapsulate this downtown community. The next slide, please. So planners indeed create an important legacy. They work at the city scale. They also very often intervene within existing neighborhoods and environment. We also direct the growth and the planning and the shaping up of suburbs, but it's really the home of 2/3 of the Canadians. By and large, we are a suburban nation. But what planning really advocates for in the last 2 decades is really the fusion of design, planning, and policy to create a very diverse and versatile neighborhood mosaic that embraces change and really creates an important legacy of high quality design and built form that is conducive to dynamic evolution. One of the important principles, and again, this is one of the new neighborhoods, relatively new, created in the last 15 years in Vancouver, the Northeast development along South Falls Creek, where indeed the emphasis is on walkable neighborhoods. Again, strong public realm that brings green and blue and also human interaction together, so that people can enjoy these public spaces that provide them an opportunity indeed to interact, to enjoy diversity, and indeed experience urban life and its many benefits. The next one. A very important principle that defines planning today in Canada, but also globally, is the emphasis on high quality public realm and the open spaces, and in particularly in the design of the open spaces, landscape architecture has a greater role to play. And again, these are examples from some neighborhoods in Vancouver's downtown, where you can see this incredible opportunity to actually experience the city and experience diversity, but also capitalize on, again, the dialogue that built form and design establishes with the natural environment in the public realm. The next one. But we also, as planners, deal with the historic places, places that are a very important element of our past and indeed our present and future. We adapt some of these historic landscapes. We preserve them because they're a symbol of who we are, of our collective identity as citizens, but also as Canadians. Planners very often have to deal with a lot of diversity. Our cities are really becoming the home of over 160 ethnic groups. Calgary is reaching that trajectory. We have an incredible milieu of different cultures that also need to find a place, a way to actually demonstrate that vibrancy and create these social spaces for community development and community interaction. A lot of the work that we do is very much collaborating with community groups, residents of neighborhoods and also cities, certainly developers, designers, architects, social workers, urban health experts, transportation planners, civil engineers, to actually navigate and co-design and co-plan that amazing urban transformation in the 21st century that is essential for us. And this is also reflected in the approach that we take to the design of our curriculum, and again, in embracing the diversity of our graduates, and also providing an opportunity for them to make the choices that they want to make, because some of the planners will choose to deal with heritage preservation, conservation of our history. Some of the planners will work with social groups. Some of them will make a commitment to ecological design or become policy and planning leaders at the municipal level. The next slide, please. Indeed, as Graham mentioned, housing is very, very important. It's certainly the home and the place where people withdraw from the complexity and diversity and the stress of urban life. But indeed, housing is a huge investment. Multi-million-dollar investments, very often coordinated by planners. They're really the leaders of these neighborhood-based transformations so that we can recreate and reimagine large urban places such as the East Village or the downtown in Calgary and reinvent them as inclusive communities. And this is an example of such explorations in the city of Montreal, where indeed the emphasis of planning and city-led regeneration is on the creation of these collective spaces that bring affordable housing, cooperative housing, housing for ownership into diverse and inclusive housing milieu that constitutes, again, the major and the dominant building block of any neighborhood, of any place. The next one. So who we are, again, the third W, very important for a lot of you who are considering our school in your application process. Urban planning, urban and regional planning, indeed was established in the 70s, one of the first planning programs in Canada. And today we celebrate 50 years of that amazing transformation of our school, but also of the planning program itself. It has embraced also the addition of the new arrival in the last 5-6 years, the program of landscape architecture. The planners are indeed a professionally accredited body, and I'm very proud to be one of the fellows of the Canadian Institute of Planners. We also have a provincial entity that regulates the planning profession. So it's very important that our school, really, our curriculum is relevant. It's also providing those important links between theory and practice, and is preparing our graduates for the very diverse and versatile tasks that they could take. Some of our graduates would be working in rural or small communities in Alberta very often at the start of their career. A lot of our graduates are working for large municipalities such as the City of Calgary, City of Edmonton, but also Vancouver, City of Toronto, many places in Ontario and BC. Some of our graduates today are working internationally, have assisted places like Haiti in the rebuilding after the hurricane, and also work in underprivileged communities in the US and also Latin America. And I'm really proud to see some of these champions of our education, and also people that have established exciting careers and have made an incredible accomplishment in their professional planning career. A lot of these graduates, particularly the ones that are based in Calgary, we invite them as guest lecturers, as reviewers in our studios. The program, and contrary to what we have in landscape architecture and architecture, the program is really intense. It's a 2-year program. It really is open in terms of admission from different academic backgrounds. We have a lot of international students, and I enjoy that interaction with international students in particular. There's a lot of emphasis on kind of a sequence of lectures, seminars, studios, but also project-based learning. As Graham mentioned, we are very much focused on on collaboration with communities, with the professional world of practice, and very often work with local communities to really implement a real change and transformation to the extent possible. And of course, there is a lot of emphasis on graphics, on design skills, computer animation, and a number of technological tools that we use as planners to be able to capture dynamic influences that affect the world of urban transformation and deliver the most important changes that we are going to make. And at the end, I would say that perhaps planning is really something that is very, very special. It provides incredible opportunities for all of you to embrace this growing profession and indeed be able to influence the world of cities and create an important legacy that we start to build today. But it's also very, very important that we are cognizant of our past, we understand and present in a very analytical way our present, and we're able to predict the future, because indeed planning regulates a lot of the processes in the city. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. That was excellent. And now I would like to invite Jen Tellifer, our academic programs coordinator, to share about our minor in architectural studies.
Thanks, Alexa. I'm going to share my screen just to our website here that talks about our minor in architectural studies. So basically, as most of you know, to become a registered architect in Canada, you must complete a Master of Architecture, which is the first professional degree. A 4-year bachelor's degree is required for admission to the Master of Architecture program. Any discipline is acceptable. We get asked that a lot from high school students. What program should I take? It's really up to you. It's what you like and what you enjoy. We want you to enjoy it because it means you're going to get good grades. So common degrees we see are fine arts, design, engineering, urban studies, business, communications, and some sciences, but really we've seen everything. We don't have an architecture or planning or landscape architecture undergraduate program or major at UCalgary. Our version of the undergraduate architecture program is a minor in architectural studies, or the ARST minor, ARST. This allows for flexibility because you can do 2 areas of specialization. So your main program would be your major that you choose, and then the architectural studies is the minor. We don't look at high school transcripts for either the ARST minor applications or the Master of Architecture applications. So any requirements for high school courses are going to depend on the bachelor program that you choose. I'm going to show you guys the courses that you'll take in the program, and here's a glossary of terms that might help you as well. Students who successfully complete the ARST minor and are accepted into the Master of Architecture at UCalgary are admitted into our 2-year master's program. They are not expected to complete the foundation year because the minor courses are the same courses that are in the foundation year. If you complete the UCalgary degree without the ARST minor, that's totally fine. You would just apply to the 3-year Master of Architecture program, and if admitted, it would be starting with the foundation year. This means your education path would be 4 years plus 3 years for a total of 7 if you don't do the minor, as opposed to if you do the minor, where it would be 4 plus 2. You would apply to the ARST minor after starting your bachelor's program here in your 2nd year. So this is not a direct entry program. You don't apply directly from high school. Applications for the ARST minor are accepted every year between October 1st and February 1st. So for full admission requirements, you can check everything out on our website. In closing, we want to thank Dr. Libby and Dr. Sankova for their presentations today. If you are interested in learning more about SAPL, our programs, research projects, or student work, you can sign up for our newsletters, follow us on social media, or read our news stories on the website. If you are in the process of preparing your application to SAPL, we invite you to attend our other information sessions through the fall. You can also watch the recorded sessions from faculty, students, and alumni on our website. Finally, if you have questions, you can always email us, or you can attend our drop-in Ask SAPL sessions that we have every month this term. We're happy to answer questions and provide guidance through the application process. Lastly, we want to thank everyone for coming to our discovery session. We hope that you enjoyed learning more about our student experience, school, and programs.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we've arrived at our Q&A, our question answer period. As a friendly reminder, if you have a question and you want to ask it live and in real time, you can use the Zoom button and raise your hand, and then I can call on you to ask your question. Or alternatively, if you're unable to say your question verbally, you can send it into the chat and then I'll read it aloud for you. And while everyone is getting prepared with their questions, we did have one from earlier. So is it possible to enroll in the MARC program from civil engineering? And what is the GPA requirement?
Absolutely. The civil engineering bachelor degree is definitely eligible for admission into the MARC. The one piece we like to note to people interested in engineering is that if you're intending to apply to the ARST minor, the engineering programs are usually quite restrictive with how you use your option courses. So it's probably going to end up being 5 years to fit everything in. Which is fine. So it's up to you to decide if you want to do 5 years at the undergrad level and get that minor done and then apply to the 2-year master's, or just do straight engineering and then apply to the 3-year Master of Architecture. And for GPA, we look at the last 2 years of your bachelor degree and a minimum of 3.0 on the 4-point scale.
Great. Okay, thank you. And now we have another one here. Do we have any general advice for high school students interested in architecture?
Graham, do you want to try that one?
Right. We haven't really talked about it, but the portfolio is an exceptionally important aspect of an application to the architecture program and also, I believe, to landscape architecture. Not quite sure about planning. But there's opportunities to begin to develop your skill sets in high school with courses, say, in art, probably in courses like drafting, if they still offer that course. But certainly the portfolio that we look for is kind of like a fine arts portfolio. So we certainly encourage students to get involved in drawing and painting and photography and sculpture and that sort of thing, because you'll certainly need that kind of material when it comes to making your application. So that's also material you can continue to develop in your university studies as you move towards applying to an architecture school. And basically all architecture schools require a portfolio, and we have some information on the website about what we're looking for. But of course, then beyond that, just doing well at school. I mean, we don't have prerequisite courses, but I believe some schools do. So you have to look at each school that you're interested in applying to and look at their admissions requirements. Every school does it slightly differently. We don't have prerequisites, but obviously we look for students who have strong academic records and a strong portfolio. And then beyond that, of course, any life experiences or interesting employment also factors into how we evaluate applicants.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. We have another question that's come in. Is the urban studies degree a profitable course for me to use to gain my bachelor's and pursue the MARC program, or would a course in civil engineering be more useful?
I can answer that question. It's a smart question because we have graduates who have those, have, along with their professional architecture degree, have another substantial degree. It could be in business, it could be in engineering, and sometimes or often graduates who have those options can translate those into career opportunities. As well, my one caution about engineering is that it's a very demanding program, of course. It's a strong route into architecture, and we've had students come to us primarily with degrees, I would say, in structural engineering. Whether that makes your life more profitable, I'm not sure. we like the urban studies program because, I think as Sasha and I have been saying, we have a very strong interest in urban studies. And as Sasha said, the city is such a important aspect of how we think about the planet moving forward. So, having a background in a kind of interdisciplinary program in urban studies is certainly something we think is very useful and would work for really any of our programs. Interestingly, we're looking at a new undergraduate degree that would have a strong emphasis on those kinds of studies.
If I may add to that, we have historically, we've had a fair number of our planning students coming from urban studies. It's a joy to have them in our classes. They do extremely well. And indeed, they come with a more well-rounded perspective on a lot of the issues that are essential for the planning program. Again, we offer programs that are accredited, so they go through rigorous review process. So a lot of the content that we need to cover is defined by the professional body. And indeed, it's very important that we do so. We even exceed these expectations very often, especially in our schools with that interdisciplinary milieu where you can really embrace issues of urban design, for example, or ecological planning and take courses from other programs as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I always say, I mean, we've had students from all academic disciplines. And so I always say, take something that you're going to do well in. Because, and so we've had students come to us with degrees in mathematics and degrees in English literature, certainly from fine arts and design programs. But as Sasha and I have said, urban studies is certainly a good option. Somebody else has asked again about the minor in architecture. I think they must have missed what Jen had to say. As Jen said, it's very difficult to do the minor in architectural studies in a civil engineering program without adding a year-to-year studies, just because there isn't the room for electives in an engineering degree, certainly not at the University of Calgary. It's also interesting to note that the engineering program at the University of Calgary has a very strong design emphasis, so something to keep in mind.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you so much for all of your responses there. I did have a follow-up one for planning. Specifically, if a student is interested in pursuing planning later on, what would be the most beneficial undergraduate education to pursue? And I know we discussed the urban studies, but is there anything else that we could maybe discuss in that realm?
Well, this is the beauty of planning, that it's really so versatile, and indeed it deals with complexity in different levels. So, for example, transportation planners that have an incredibly important task in our cities that are so dependent on different modes of transportation, very often actually will have degrees in engineering, undergraduate degrees in engineering. So they go through the 2-year planning program to actually become an accredited professional planner, but then there are opportunities for specialization that usually it takes about 2 to 3 years to actually receive that acknowledgement. And so that there is the opportunity there. I've also seen a lot of people with interest in biology and also a number of science disciplines with an interest in environmental issues that actually come into planning. And that's a very popular stream and a very popular route, actually. So they do extremely well, and there are a lot of jobs and opportunities out there for people that deal with environmental issues. So it really depends. But if you're interested in cities, again, the urban studies is a great foundation. Also, a lot of the students that I teach today are coming from social sciences. They have a social science degree, and that is a great segue into these issues of diversity, equity, fairness that is so important for our cities. And today, even in this pandemic and post-pandemic world, actually, we see how the people with that kind of expertise have an incredible role to play in shaping responses, in shaping really public policy, and also ways through which public spaces and the built environment responds to imperatives of urban health and society in general. So I think that's really the beauty of the profession, and also our challenge indeed as educators and practitioners, that we have to be really the Renaissance planner, being able to take on various tasks depending on where you work, the city where you work, the public or the private company that you work for. And indeed, the more skills you have, the better, both on the technical side, but also in terms of leadership, communication, and indeed the bread and butter of planning, which is land use planning and design.
Great. Okay. Thank you. And then we just have one more that snuck in here asking if taking the urban studies program would help to build the portfolio.
I don't, well, and I'm not, I don't believe within the urban studies curriculum, there would be courses specifically on the kind of work that we're looking for. So you would have to augment your curriculum with courses from fine arts, elective courses, but we certainly would recommend courses in drawing certainly as a sort of foundation for your portfolio.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much. We will wrap up here. Thank you everyone for your attendance and your attention and for your questions. Thank you to our speakers today. And if you have any other questions, please visit our website, send an email to us at SAPL Admissions. We really look forward to seeing your applications either soon or in the future. And yes, thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.